Our next presentation deals with augmented reality. Our speaker is Jenkin Lee, Vice President of Product for In-Context Solutions. Jenkin, take it away.
All right. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully we can get a little excited about technology as we talk about augmented reality and how it applies to, or how it could apply to us in our CPG roles. So in a fun fashion, we'll start off with a quick poll, and it's giving me some fun context here of, has anyone used AR or augmented reality for any business-related reason? Let's go ahead and get a few responses in here. Got about 50 folks online, 15 answers coming in. That'll about 20 responses. Give it a few more seconds here. I know I have. Alrighty, let's see. I'm actually surprised that there are a few, and I don't believe they're all from In Context either. So that's really exciting to know that there are some treads out there. Now, what would make this, I think, most meaningful and important is to first settle on some definitions, and this is really important because with all the buzzwords that are going out there as the advent of technology are coming along, it's a little confusing to know what's what. And so just from a setting perspective, AR, or augmented reality, is essentially a technology that superimposes something that's computer generated on a view that is already known to the user in the actual real world. And so we would call that a composite view. Here's a pictorial representation of this continuum. Found it online. I thought it was really great. Wanted to share it with everyone here. There's, of course, the physical reality on the left that we're all used to. This is our day-to-day. And we've heard of virtual reality, which is actually where In Context has roots as well, in terms of full head-mounted device, technological occlusion into a new space, right? You can essentially be somewhere else. And then there's this in-between space, and one is augmented reality, and then there's another term that has been introduced recently called mixed reality. And the idea here is that augmented reality allows the user, mostly applications are through an iPad or basically a portable device like an iPad, an iPhone, mobile device, where it uses the cameras and then it overlays something else in there. So, and then mixed reality is a hybrid of those two. And I think from a common day-to-day perspective, everyone's heard at some level of the Pokemon Go game, and this was actually the industry's, across the board, the industry's biggest foray into having a successful implementation of augmented reality from a business perspective. So this is obviously a game, and here the users would be outside. They would take their game, essentially it uses their camera application. They point it anywhere out in nature, whether it's, in the case of here, it's looking at the lake, and the game understands that, and through location awareness of the device, prompts additional pictorial objects onto the screen. So in this case, Pokemon show up when I'm looking at an area of outdoors. So that is a full implementation of AR, augmented reality. And so, okay, let's tie that a little less from the fun and games, essentially, to a little more business-oriented, a little closer into us in CPG. What you're seeing here now are 3 pictures of big AR implementations from some household names. So in the upper left-hand corner is a augmented reality implementation from Wayfair. In the upper right-hand corner, it's an augmented reality implementation from Home Depot. And on the bottom, it's one from IKEA. And in all 3 cases, the spirit of the implementation, the intent, is the same. The idea is there are products online, and those products are meant to be purchased by consumers. But in order to close the barrier of having the consumer see and visualize, because big purchases are, there's a higher barrier to purchase and trial in this case, what would it look like in my home? So in this case, all 3 retailers are leveraging an AR product to bring that consumer one step closer to the ownership experience of seeing what it would look like. So does the pattern of the match? Does the style match? Is the sizing appropriate and approximate? In this case, I looked at the bottom picture of IKEA. What about the full implementation of not just a chair, but a table and chairs and all the other accessories that come into that? What could my kitchen look like? And so this kind of gives you a little more of a business sense of how retailers have been using this and manufacturers. And then there's how In Context has been taking that further. And so the idea here is we've started to pair a mindset around augmented reality as one of the fastest ways to merchandise ideas in real time. So as simple as that, I like to call it photoshopping on the fly. I'll just show you a quick example. You got a picture on the left, picture on the right, before and after. A vendor came to us and said, hey, I wonder what my, in this case, what my cooler could look like at a potential QSR location. Here's what it looks like on the left. And because they were on site, they were able to bring in some content pieces that says, well, it could look like this on the right. And so this was an experiment that allowed them to see that very quickly. I don't know if this resonates with everyone, but it's very similar to a very popular bar game of Photo Hunt, where you have two pictures on the left and right. These differences are actually achieved through photoshopping, and the idea is to play a game of what's different. And you have a similar effect, again, one more time here, of what's different with my, in this case, another convenience store setup. The idea here is also I brought in this display and to see what it looks like. Now, if you look at quick glance at the picture on the right, yeah, you can tell that the display is a little sharper looking than the picture around it. Something looks a little different. It's very obvious that was, essentially, quote, photoshopped in. But the difference in times between the times that these two pictures were taken were less than a minute of each other. And I'll show you the real world example in a moment. But the idea here is I didn't even have to take anything off the shelf to visualize what it might look like to have something else on the shelf, in this case, a different type of cooler. So this is where we're starting to see a lot of excitement around augmented reality to use, to show theoretical setups and potential ideations on the fly, especially when different retailing scenarios might be different from each other, right? So if you have a more modern banner store that has similar layouts, then that's one thing. But then if you're going into different markets that has a lot of uniqueness amongst all the layouts, and I think of convenience stores and how they're set up, that's when it allows for setups like this to be a little more advantageous to show the span of ideation. And of course, invariably, a question happens all the time is, how is this possible? How does this even work? And there's a lot of complicated technology on the back end, but it's a quite simple idea. A lot of the modern mobile devices, iPads, iPhones, especially the latest ones, the 10 and the 11 or the iPad Pros, they're using a combination of what's called a depth sensing capability and of course, the camera. And so what's happening is that when you turn the camera on, it's able to identify a surface, or in technical terms, a plane, in geometry. So it can detect a surface. And what that means to us is that it can detect the floor, it can detect the wall, it can detect the tabletop. And once you can detect that, that means you also have a sense of size, and then from size, space, distance, and then you have relative representation. And so what you're looking at here is an image of the native iPhone augmented reality app to measure. And the idea here and the value proposition was, you don't have to carry a tape measure around. You can just turn on this measure app. It uses the camera to see what's in front of it. It'll detect surfaces, and then by using your finger to drag points around, in this case, it's the book on the table. How big is that book? And this user is probably maybe 18 inches, 24 inches away from the book. But the idea here is that the app is telling the user that the book's about 5 inches wide. The tape measure in the background shows that it's 5.5 inches, which shows it doesn't have a construction work level of precision, but the tolerance is more than acceptable, and it's actually really, really good and exciting because now you can have a sense of realisticness, if you will, with using this tech. For myself, I tried it in the room, and the tolerance does not stretch out, so I had a 10-foot by 2-foot table, and it came in as 10 foot 2 inches by 2 feet. And so it was, when this technology has definitely come to the point where it's now good enough to use for applications. And we think that quick ideation like this, especially in merchandising, is where we can take advantage of this most right now. So that's very exciting. One more video here to show how it actually works from start to finish. I'm going to hit play, and you'll see here that a user just opened up I think they're on an iPad Pro right now. They're in a front entryway of a grocery store. Their phone already mapped, or the device already mapped the surface, and through the availability of some content pieces, I can easily drag them essentially into my store. So in this case, they pull out the fruit stand. I'm going to pull out another cooler here. I'm going to push it over there. I think putting it next to the elevator would be nice. We'll get a chip stand and put that next to it. Does that fit well and not prevent egress or anything? Yep, that looks pretty good. That'll fit just like that, and maybe we'll put some signage up on the ceiling here. I have one there. I'm going to place this, rotate it. It senses the surface, and I'm going to step back and admire all the quick work that I did. Yep, this looks pretty good, exactly what I want. As you can see, someone's actually in the store. This is all happening real time. I can then take a screenshot with this, and now I can send it to my boss. I can send it to my provider. I can send it to, and other people on the team to show, hey, that idea you had actually fits well in the local store XYZ, right? And you can now have an immediate conversation about the value of ideated content in a retail environment. So that's essentially locking the premise of what the value we see that we're experimenting with right now as it applies to augmented reality. The ability for us now is to focus on not just, hey, let me put chairs and couches and stuff in my retail store. It's really around retail spaces, because we're here at In Context, we're about retail visualization and simulation. So it's really around displays, fixtures, signage, and then any of the other ancillary items that you might be manipulating in your macro space planning endeavors. One of the biggest things, and so when talking to clients, often the question will come up is like, oh, this looks like really cool. Everyone agrees it's cool. No one ever disagrees about that. And then the natural next question is, so how do I get started? And this is where it gets a little tricky, because everyone's, we go into a retail environment today, and all the displays are different, right? You know that your favorite retailer has different displays customized to that retailer than somewhere else, right? Grocery store shelves, even as they used to all be the same, and now even they're being a little differentiated for stylized differences. And so in order to represent any of those items in an AR application, all of that content has to be modeled. And it's not just, let me take a picture of this display. Okay, great. Now let's put that display in my AR app. I need to actually model in 3D that display, and then I could put it into my AR app to use for my visualizations. So a lot of times the barrier comes to the conversation, kind of slows down around, well, I want to get everything in here. Okay, well, how many pieces of content? And then it's like, well, we have to model all that content. And stores easily have hundreds of displays, even departments themselves, especially when you're looking with apparel or electronics. There's a lot of different floor height displays and signage needs and stuff. So that's where it starts to become a little tricky, is how to balance the budgets around, let's get a lot of content made, but then content changes all the time, so I need to remake that in 3D again. So those are some of the cons, if you will, to why this isn't rampant everywhere. Even for Home Depot and IKEA and Wayfair, all of those items that you see online have to be, yes, there are images there. They have to be 3D modeled for them to be used in their apps as well. So, huge 3D content teams are behind the scenes making that a reality, and the intent here is to also enable that for retail. So, lots of excitement there. This is where we see the value, and if anyone on this call is interested, we can continue to experiment that value with you guys as well. One of the reasons why we are trying to push this forward and taking advantage of what we can do in AR, especially when it's that just quick iterative. We know that there's trends and themes around strategy that are around fail fast, iterate quickly, keep moving forward, right? There's this almost agile method, if you will, to merchandising. And this is supported by the realities of what I'll call just the realities of the space in terms of just how macro space or even category management works. And so I'll just review those three tough realities that we observe. And and why we think the AR now has a leverageable opportunity. And the first opportunity here is just understanding that customer organizations are inherently complicated, right? And the larger you get, where there is a higher opportunity for ROI of using quick ideation, actually the organization itself gets larger and it's harder to cross-cut everyone's, right? So just the idea of having, sales, all the sales leaders having to work with the strategy leaders, and then those strategies being laid out to then roll into a category management process, and then being able to support it by the visual merchandising and the shopper marketing there, and then having the revenue guys come in and understand that there's enough dollars and cents to make the plan financially viable, makes it tough, right? And so getting ideas quickly into that system is always an opportunity. The question is how? Well, AR opportunities allow for that visual conversation to happen faster. The second thing, and this is a little bit of a 2A and 2B process, is the category management process itself, right? So especially when it comes down to some of those shelf level microspace planning areas, we know that to define the category as it might be changing, making sure that that role is set and assessed, and that any strategies that are intended to be followed through and that they'll have positive ROI effects, hopefully, and then making sure that everything else is aligned to support that, and then to finally execute it successfully. We know that takes a long time. Well, instead of seeing all that through, we know that there's opportunities, and when their budgets allow themselves to test and learn, we know there's different levels of gradation. I just want to see it. What would it even look like? And we all know that seeing is, one is seeing is believing, and two, picture says 1,000 words. If I could just see what it looked like in context of the store, that would be so much better than taking all these micro steps to get through that to that visualization point, and then realizing, I didn't know if this is actually what we wanted, or maybe we want to make a change. This is not what I had expected, right? So if we can make content pieces quickly, allow them to be visualized in a real store environment, or 2 or 3 or however many are necessary, get that context quickly, we can inform and help our processes better. And then the 2B here is the operation planning cycles of the businesses themselves, right? And some of this is very similar because, again, from a different angle, they're evaluating what they need to do. They have to plan for it. There's based upon your fiscal years, depending on where this is coming into play, and then being able to activate against that. So it's really hard. I've been in a lot of client conversations where everyone always has well, if only we could have done this, or yeah, that makes sense, but we're tied, and the process is tied in all these other ways, so I can't really do something there, right? And there's these feelings of being stuck despite desires to unstick themselves. And this is not to say that augmented reality is going to solve all of that, but being able to bring up, because everyone wants to see it, no one believes it until they see it in color, right? So being able to bring that color to the front of the conversation allows a lot of other things to flow downstream easier. And we think that bringing AR into the entire software suite of ShopperMX, which is our software for retail visualization, is what's going to make it a much more crisper retailing and simulation experience, especially as you're trying to conceptualize new ideas, bold ideas to help move the needle forward, test those, and then make them come out true in market, wherever that market is, because all markets are different. So hopefully that's a little more magical than a simple Photoshop. It's obviously an exciting space because of the rapid pace of change in technologies. I'll walk into a mobile store today, and pretty much all the latest smartphones now have this capability. And so seeing how the technology is now proliferative, and it's all out there. A lot of field service teams are already walking around with a variety of mobile devices that actually have this capability in it. And so to be able to take advantage of this one more time and allow that iteration loops to get closed and tighter, it's very exciting for us to see what that would change in the market. So thank you for joining, and if there's any open questions, we can answer them now. Otherwise, I'll just put my contact information, and we'll take the conversation from there.
Sure. We've got a few questions, Jenkin.
Great.
What is the benefit? What is the benefit of AR versus seeing it in VR with a headset?
So the biggest benefit of AR versus VR is the benefit of time. As you saw in the video, I was able to be in the grocery store. That was basically my context of the day. And then I just had to edit that sign or edit that display. I brought that in. So it's a very quick way, and then I can share that. It's a very quick way to get the visualization I need to demonstrate that to whoever my stakeholder is. What VR does is it allows the entire environment to change. And so when simulating a full VR environment, which is in context ethos, we actually build the whole supermarket for change. And so some of our clients will come in and change the entire front of the store. They'll edit all aspects of signage and displays and merchandising. So it's just a fuller representation. And so the basic question is, what's the use case? Am I trying to edit something that's existing or create something entirely new, like a store of the future, for example? Depending on the boldness or basically the magnitude of that change would dictate the magnitude of the technology you would want to use, and then that would actually cascade down into the cost of how much 3D modeling you want to do.
Okay, here's an actionable question that came in. How do we get started? Do we need to provide our own 3D assets?
So yeah, that's a really good question, and that's a really common one that we get too. It's quite easy to get started. The biggest thing is to first come with an understanding of what are you trying to model or show. So some clients are like, we have 3 displays from our agency. This is for our new campaign. We just want to get these new signage pieces into a system so that we can go to the retail stores or our quick service, vendors and show what they would look like on, superimposed onto their stores. So that's a very simple way. They can come with their content. It's flat. It's 2D imagery. A step up about that is, hey, I wanted to redesign the front layout of my store. I have a bunch of different displays, and then it goes one of 2 ways. Either here are the displays. We have an internal 3D team that's modeled them out. Can we get these models into your system? That's great. We can do that. Or here's some artist renderings of displays, and here at In Context we have a full 3D modeling team that will, basically convert those into usable 3D models for ShopperMX. So it's pretty straightforward. You got to come with your intent of how much stuff, if you will, technical term, you want to be visualizing in the store, and then it's a question around how to approach the 3D modeling. Once the models are done, goes into the ShopperMX application, and then you can edit and play with them at your leisure.
Okay, well, here's a specific question. Is the AR app part of the ShopperMX license?
So that's actually up for debate right now. The ShopperMX license we don't merchandise that with full AR capabilities. What you saw is actually part of some R&D that we're doing and some pilots with clients right now. And so what we're actually trying to figure out is the value of this so different that it becomes a separate product, or do we just build this into the value that ShopperMX is today? And so, and we've actually had some pretty strong opinions on both points, but if anyone's asking that question, I would love to speak to them, because the bottom line is we want to make that scenario just work for our clients. We know the content that is being used is most likely being used for all cases, so most likely it's just going to be a consistent add-on to the license for ShopperMX users, but we're all flexible around that right now.
Okay. Do you think that most CPG manufacturers and retailers really understand augmented reality, or is it still a learning curve?
I think it's a little bit of both, and it's not as bad as virtual reality. You talk to someone about virtual reality and like, huh? Like, I've seen that in the games. What is that really? How am I using it? And it's a educational barrier to be overcome first, and then what the technology is before we can explain the benefits and use cases. I think augmented reality is a lot easier for the primary reason that the devices that enable augmented reality are currently in existence, and they have been for about 1 or 2 years in everyone's pockets, right? And so the fact that a lot of mobile devices are enabled for an AR experience of some sort allows that understanding to just happen easier. It's not as a stark or a bold difference in technology use. So the conversation is still a little bit educational. I think everyone's familiar with the term. They've heard of it. They don't really know exactly what it is until they see an example. And so this video that I showed everyone today is a common video. It just takes a minute, and I'll start that with a lot of client conversations, and then it's like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. I get that. Wait, so I can use it on my phone, right? And I'll show them my phone, and we'll do the same thing. It's like, oh yeah, that's neat, right? And so the concept gets solidified pretty quickly once you just take a minute to go through that.
Okay, well, I think that's all the questions we had. Thank you very much. I certainly learned a lot about augmented reality I did not know. And if anybody in the audience wants to continue the conversation with Jenkin Lee, jenkin.lee@incontextsolutions.com is on the screen, and you can certainly reach out to him. I'm sure he'll welcome your call. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you again, Jenkin. Okay.
Thank you.